Hey there, my name is Kai and I am a bit of a rambler. I like to travel, learn, and tell stories. And today's the first Reramble. I'm going to throw the disclaimer up here again because it's been over 100 episodes. I am giving more advice these days because more people are writing in, and the Lemmy community is pretty popular. So, with that in mind, I want to make it very clear that I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not a legal advisor and all that kind of stuff. I travel. I've been traveling for a long time and I have life experiences and I can tell people what I do that works and how much ticket prices are and English teaching jobs. But I make mistakes and I'm wrong all the time and the world is changing all the time. So bearing all that in mind, I thought it would be a good time to restate my disclaimer that I'll do everything I can to provide accurate and helpful information about traveling and fun stuff about traveling. But I'm not always going to be right, and I am well aware that I make mistakes all the time. So, thank you everyone for listening, and take it away. Me from before? Today is my disclaimer episode, because I give so much advice, and I share so many stories, I talk so much about the world, and I don't want to give the impression that I think I'm always correct or completely knowledgeable about any of this. You don't have to travel. You don't have to travel like I travel. You don't have to teach English or any of this. This is just how I understand the world. My life is pretty good right now, and I attribute that to the decision to go teach English in China, which led to owning my companies and then learning about travel and learning how I liked to live. But I didn't do that myself. I couldn't have done that unless other people had done it before me, and there were other systems and institutions in place that I joined and learned from, but didn't start up myself. So I constantly remind myself how lucky I am to be where I am, even though I made the choice to leave my home country, start traveling, and start learning things, which I do think is key. Most people can't just depend on getting lucky. It wouldn't have really mattered unless I was living at this exact moment in history. So many things had to happen for me to get to where I am now, where I am pretty content with how my life turned out. English teaching itself is a great example because I just happened to be living at the time English is so popular globally, the lingua franca of the world in business and casual society. And transportation happens to be accessible enough that I can easily travel to other countries in a couple of hours and start teaching it. And the developing internet is coming along, so I can look up all the jobs in which I can teach English and where I can teach English and how much money I can make. Visas are mostly online, super easy. If I was born 50 years before, it would be so much trouble to travel and start teaching English, and there wouldn't be many English schools available, and I wouldn't be looking up any of these jobs online. And if I was born 50 years later, automatic translation is probably going to make English teaching much less popular than it is now. Or the ad for the school itself. I got that ad because I decided to check Craigslist in the middle of playing Mario Kart on a day I had just been let go from a job from a probationary period where I didn't work out, which has never happened before. Could have posted that ad in the correct section of Craigslist instead of the wrong for sale section, and I never would have seen the ad, and I probably never would have taken advantage of that or a similar opportunity. I could be still working, maybe as the manager of a sandwich store, barely making ends meet. But because I happened to be home, and I happened to want a video game controller, and happened to list the advertisement in the wrong section of Craigslist. Oh, and I happened to be born in a country whose first language is English, so I spoke English natively. So many things had to happen. Statistically, I should have been born in China, speaking Mandarin. But I wasn't. I just happened to be born in a country where the native language is English, and that affords me this opportunity to escape from a life of capitalist strictures and corporate drudgery. And again, transportation is available so I can escape societal drudgery as well. The awareness of how uniquely beneficial being able to teach English is right now really makes me treasure how my life turned out. And it's really important for me to hold this in my mind, since it's so easy to become spoiled by the privileges of my job. And I know it is because after a certain amount of time, years but sometimes months, living such a convenient and rewarding lifestyle that English teaching affords people, all of my friends at some point began to complain about non-issues, things that they would never think about if they were still struggling in the United States to survive, but because they have more money and free time than they know what to do with teaching English abroad, it's easier to make mountains out of molehills when you don't have any mountains to climb anymore. In fact, a large reason why I left China was because I felt myself starting to complain about things that I know I didn't really care about. I was starting to make mountains out of molehills because I had shortcut to the end of capitalist success, which is what I had been falsely told was the aim of life. And I began to rest on my laurels and critically eye all of those molehills. And I know I'm not the first person to think about teaching English abroad. I turned down opportunities in college to teach abroad that I heard about. I knew friends who went to teach abroad, and I didn't look into it. I heard about teaching abroad when I was looking for jobs. And I'm not sure what my thought process was, but I feel like it was something like, nah, that's hard. Or like, nah, I don't know how to do that. Even though the ads sounded like I do now. I can teach you how to move abroad. I can teach you how to teach English. Telling you this is an opportunity, you should try it out. And I just didn't. Until that chance ad appeared at just the right moment where I was ready to take a chance on traveling. And an interesting corollary is, rather than being spoiled, which is something I was trying to leave behind when I left China, the reason I went to China, a huge part of that was that I knew American capitalist society was the wrong track for me. I worked at a few jobs, and although I was successful at them, I never felt fulfilled in any sense of the word. So that made me ready to take this chance. I was sure that the places my American businesses were leading me were incorrect. And that ad means that people did this before me again, which I also keep constant in my mind. I met this woman who traveled to China back in the 1970s when Mao Zedong was still alive. She showed me a scrapbook. Beijing looked like a couple blocks of concrete in the middle of a jungle. And then I lived there 50 years later, and it's the sprawling urban metropolis you see in newspapers. And she went to China by herself 50 years ago. I don't even know what she was doing. I think she just wanted to visit, and she just lived in China like a badass for a couple months, or maybe she lived there for a year. I can't remember. She didn't teach English also. I don't know maybe she was CIA, who knows. And then the guy who put up the ad, he started a school before I did, and when I got to China, there were already hundreds of schools, and that's why teaching English is such a great opportunity, because there are jobs everywhere. But the reason this is such an easy and accessible career is because other people did a lot more work than I did, and they already started up these schools everywhere. So at this point, if you're a native English speaker, all you have to do is plug yourself in. But that's not because it always was that easy, or it's always going to be that easy. It's just that right now, there is an opportunity to go teach English and make as much money as you want in dozens of countries. And if travel and experience is more important to you than money, or you already have enough money, you can visit any country, nearly any country, in person and go teach English, or you can live in any country and teach English online. So even if it's a country like Denmark that has such high English levels, they don't really need as many English teachers, you could still go live there and just teach English to Asian students online and make your money that way if you've always wanted to live in Denmark or England or some other English-speaking country. So I constantly keep in my mind that I am enjoying the fruits of labor put in by people building these systems and institutions and being brave and smart far before I existed. And when I tell these stories, I also have to bear in mind that I am wrong all the time. So whenever I talk about something I know, according to my experience or some objective fact, like how cheap it is to buy a ticket to Asia relative to the prices people think it is, it's $300 to fly to Asia. A lot of people think it's $1,000. Or how simple it is to get a teaching English as a foreign language certificate, how simple the process is. And right now, those facts are very relevant for anybody who is having financial trouble or just doesn't like to work in the US like I don't. So I want to share those facts, but I could have those facts wrong sometimes. I'm well aware that I make mistakes because I make them so much that I'm constantly reminded of how I'm not right all the time. So I like sharing objective information like the ticket prices or what a TEFL certificate is, or how many jobs are available right now, how much money you need to travel indefinitely. But behind all of that is knowing that's what's true right now, in this moment. And like everything, that's going to eventually change. Maybe not anytime soon, but whenever I share information about visa lengths or what a TEFL certificate is or how many jobs, anything like that, anything, I know that I'm telling a story from a spot in history. When I have a conversation with someone and they're asking me questions about how to travel, my explanation of how to travel is a lot like reading a Civil War letter. Like, that's that guy's perspective of that situation that day at that time. And even though we're alive now, 200 years later, 160, whatever, we're not at the end of history. We are living right in the middle of a bunch of things happening. There's been millions of years before us, there's going to be millions of years after us. So something that seems normal, or you've heard about a lot of times, like teaching English abroad, is actually remarkable in the fact that you can just access it easily and it's so relevant and profitable right now. Awareness of opportunities is crucial, and it's so easy to see the world through a clouded lens or misunderstand, I know I do, misunderstand the world around me because I already have preconceived notions about what something is. Because I forget how unique and rare my time on the earth is, my brief time on the earth. So it's easy to see something and mistake it for something else because of my flawed and limited understanding. Like, I spoke the wrong word in China for years, many times over. I would discover, oh, that's not what that word is. And I had just been saying the wrong word for 3 years or 5 years. I wish I could remember what it was. There's one I learned like a couple weeks before I left China, and I had lived there for 6.5, 7 years, something like that. And then someone just mentioned it in the right way, and it clicked for me. And I said, oh, wait, it's... And I was able to learn a new word right before I left. I remember one for 3 years, I was saying buffet, something like that, like not fat meat. And everyone was like, yeah, okay. And then one day I heard someone, like the owner, talking to another person of the restaurant, and the owner said, shou rou. And I knew shou meant thin, like a person is thin. And I was like, excuse me, shou rou, is that like thin meat? That's buffet rou. And they're like,对, shou rou没有肥肉. Thin meat doesn't have fat. And I had been trying to learn the word for lean meat for 3 years, and locals told me there was no way to order lean meat in restaurants. All the teachers I knew who spoke Mandarin said there was no way to order just lean meat. And I just accepted that Chinese people never ate lean meat. They always mix fat in because they like the different textures. Turns out I just didn't know the word, and I wasn't asking the right way, and people weren't understanding what I was asking because they were all living in a world where everyone knows the word shoujo. And no one would say buffero, no one would say not fat meat. So I'm very aware that I am wrong all the time, and I can make mistakes, and I can not understand something for years before it finally clicks. And I really want to share a lot of this information, all of these podcast episodes are about, and I want to make it interesting by attaching my own understanding and experience to each little nugget of information. But don't assume that I believe I'm always correct in everything I say, because I am confirming here that I am not. Even when I say Beijing, I still say Beijing, and it's Beijing. It should be the first tone, but I'm just so used to saying Beijing that whenever I talk about China and living in Beijing, I use the wrong tone. Or assuming that there would be a bunch of curry in India, and then when I arrived at Bhubaneswar, everyone told me, oh no, we don't eat curry here. We eat a bunch of like soups and dishes and all that, but curry is this British thing, and Indians don't really eat it. Now that was just one state, I don't know if that's throughout India, but finding out that even one state in India just didn't eat curry, it wasn't in any of the stores or anything, pretty surprising for me. I realized all over again, as I've learned many times, that if Indians don't eat curry, I don't know anything about India. And that was really funny to find out. I was like, what's the fundamental fact about Indian cuisine? Cuisine is usually the first thing I look at a country, and I was like, well, there'll be curries around. And then I get to India, and everyone I ask is like, oh, we don't really like curry. That's kind of just a mix of our different dishes that the British colonial menu sort of bastardized. I probably asked like 20 people before I believed everybody that there was no curry, that curry wasn't popular in Bhubaneswar. But I love discovering things like that I'm so wrong about or so uninformed about, because I know I'm about to get another piece of the puzzle that's going to broaden my mind and let me appreciate the world more. Or they say buenos dias in Guatemala. They pretty much say hola all times of the day. In Panama, you know, they don't say jianjiao for pot stickers. They say zajiao if you're in a different province in China. Some people don't visit the beach ever, but a 15-minute walk away to a different town, in that town they jump in the river every night. I know it's okay that I'm wrong a lot because lifestyles, cultures, countries, provinces, towns, people are so vastly different and intertwined, interconnected, and complex. In the north of China, get chicken, pork, and beef. In the south of China, they sell those meats and puppies, giant salamanders, and Asian alligators. Even the same places are completely different month to month, not to mention year to year. When I go back to visit China, I went to visit my old town that I lived in for a year, Baijiatuan, and when I got there, it was mountains of rubble. They had demolished the entire town, and it was just little pieces of gravel. And I thought I knew what that part of China looked like, that part of Beijing. I thought I was intimately familiar with that section of this country, and it had been erased and left by the side of a highway in piles of rebar and gravel. So anytime I get asked for clarification or, are you sure, I'm as sure as I can be about this or that. There are websites online that tell me exactly how long visa stays are, but I know that visas can change. They usually don't. Even during crazy political situations, it's very rare for visas to be withdrawn or shortened. But I'm aware that can happen. So even if I've checked 100 times, when someone asks me, well, how do I get a visa to I check. Actually, this just happened. I was just helping someone go to China for the first time, and it turns out the process is way easier than it was last year. There is an e-visa method now to get your visa for China as a U.S. citizen, which was not accessible for the decade that I was there on and off, and even the last time I went just to visit. If you wanted a visa to China, you had to go in person to an embassy somewhere. Now you don't. So always in the back of my mind, I try and remember that things are always changing, and I can be as accurate as I know how to be, but I might not be correct. Also, I'm healthy. That's amazing. I constantly thank my body out loud. Like, I say thank you to my body. I acknowledge how lucky I am to be healthy. I don't do a whole ritual, but I will absolutely say thank you to my body now and then, just because My legs and arms still work. My organs appear to be functioning. And I know that my health can end any day, any time, for any reason, and I have no real way of predicting that. Not really. You can go to bed and wake up with a collapsed lung, or you can go to the hospital one week and go the next week, and your diagnosis can take a 180, from negative to positive or positive to negative. Our bodies are finite, brittle, fragile things that can be completely healthy one day and collapse the next. It's great that I'm healthy at 3:47 p.m. today, but I don't take my health at 3:47 p.m. tomorrow for granted. I take advantage of the utility of my body, which is actually funny because right now I'm sitting in a tiny audio studio, not doing it. But I go out every day and walk and exercise and marvel at the fact that I can hop up on the wall and walk and look at the Pacific Ocean. Both my eyes are still working. I still have my hearing. I don't think I'm going to be the one who stops aging after 40 years old. And I know that I don't want to avoid experiencing life because I'm afraid of life ending one day. I'm very aware, and I have been since I was very young, that life will end one day. And I'm so lucky to be enjoying every day that I have. I remember being very young, like in elementary school, and thinking forward 20 years or 30 years and just thinking how the day I was living then in elementary school was going to be a long gone memory at some point, and so I should enjoy that day. And I still have that mechanism in my psyche. All of these things that might seem normal to me, the job I worked, or my pastime is playing video games, all of these things, walking, just going for a walk after dinner, every time I do something that I think is routine, I remind myself, you are able to do this right now, and you will not always be able to, and you weren't able to before. This world could collapse into a war. That country can close its borders. I missed the window to visit Cuba because they opened briefly and then closed again. So even something routine like a evening walk after dinner, I remember this is so great that I get to do that. I love feeling the ground and looking at the trees and all that kind of stuff. I try and appreciate the world around me as much as I can because everything is changing all the time. And if I like a moment I'm in, that is a precious moment. And I think that way about traveling too. I can't believe how accessible the world is right now. I can travel to nearly any country in the world, 180 countries or so, without a visa. I can get visa on arrival or that kind of stuff. And the ones I need a visa for, I can get an e-visa almost 100% of the time. And I'll get to that country in a few hours. Maybe a day if I'm going to the absolute other side of the world diagonally. And I know that's just because of where I am, when I was born, where I was born, all of this stuff. So I'm very aware that anything I know for sure is incomplete. We cannot know even ourselves because we are changing constantly. And accepting that is a strength. I can interact with the world honestly and experience life around me with a minimum of dilution through my expectations because I'm aware that my expectations are based on a very limited set of guidelines from one geographic spot at one time in history and do not reflect some sort of objective truth just because I've experienced them often. Just because I grew up with forks does not make forks more inherently correct than chopsticks. Whenever I think, oh, that's not how you... Then I try and think, oh wait, maybe it is. Maybe that's correct. Maybe that's as correct as what I think is correct. And most of the time it is, and most of the time it doesn't even matter. Because how can you worry about anything when you're alive for such a brief period of time in such a limited set of circumstances? And how can I ever think I'm correct when I'm experiencing life, the whole world, through two eyes and one processing brain in one tiny spot, one tiny room, when the whole world is out there? I couldn't possibly think I am correct about everything when there's no way for me to know 0.5% of everything. So thank you very much for listening. I had a great time talking about this stuff. It's humbling in a very good way to recognize how insignificant I am compared to the cosmos, and how limited my understanding of anything is compared to the institution of existence in the universe. From that perspective, I think it's critical to recognize opportunities around us and take advantage of the opportunities we are able to. Because every moment of our lives is a brief flash of light in an infinitely empty sky. As far as I can see, anyway. I hope you're having a great day. Thank you very much for listening. I will talk to you soon. You can contact me at bitofarambler@gmail.com or all the socials. So long.